Well, I grew up right here. I grew up in University Park. It's been 86 years. I've been basically saying for years that I've lived on McFarland Boulevard for most of my life. I grew up down at Preston Parkway and McFarland and live right here at Williams Parkway and in McFarland. Yeah, I went to Highland Park High School, graduated in 1955, went to the University of Texas, got a business degree and a law degree, and that was back in 1959 and 1961. Well, University Park was as a result of SMU. And SMU was providing the water and the sewer for what turned out to be about 1,100 people and about 350 homes. And in 1924, they asked them to get off of their utilities and see if they could form another city or have a city annex them. The city of Dallas and the town of Highland Park did not want to annex about 575 acres out here that had already pretty much been developed as far as utilities. Well, University Park became a city in 1924, and we're going to celebrate the 100th anniversary here on, basically, it's April the 12th. And right after they asked the county to allow them to form a city here, they started annexing other land and developing some. The mayor of University Park, Mr. Smith, joined Mr. Snyder from Wichita Falls, and they developed Snyder Plaza about 1927. Now, also about that time, they gave the Volk brothers some acreage that they had already, was given to them basically by the Daniels family and the Caruth family. And they annexed area there. Now this area here was already somewhat developed. It was around Dallas Country Club, which was built about or dedicated about 1912. And they started working on SMU and getting all the land together in 1911. But it took until 1915 until they got the first building, which was a magnificent building. Robert Hire was a wonderful, wonderful architectural concern president of SMU, and with the whole, even today, we have Georgian Revival architecture. They've been true to their development there. Highland Park High School, of course, came in a little before University Park was formed, so we had a pretty good school district at that time. That's one of the biggest things that happen for the fact that Dallas normally annexes everybody because they don't have water rights. Now, this is my reading of it. In about 1938, my dad was pretty prominent at that point, head of the Lions Club later, and head of the Bar Association, and he and Mr. E.B. Germany, who was at that time very influential in Highland Park, went to Tom Conley, not John Conley. Tom Conley was a senator, United States Senator, and they both knew him. And they said, if you're going to build all these government reservoirs up and down the Trinity River, we want water rights out of Lake Grapevine, and especially if the reason for building them, which was navigation of the Trinity, which never came about, those water rights were kind of on the shelf when they had the annexation with Dallas, and very quickly my dad and others went back and got the county to give us a municipal utility district, which was called the Park Cities Municipal Utility District. That was one of the biggest things. We have the first 50,000 acre feet out of that reservoir. And Dallas got theirs in 1948, so first in time is first in right. We got ours in 1946. They got theirs in 48. Jim Wright came along much later, who was a famous congressman from Fort Worth, and Grapevine was developing. And he gave them 1,500 acre feet out of the reservoir. When I was mayor, and just right after it'd be 1952, probably after I was mayor, I got involved in adjudicating the water rights. I had been Governor Briscoe's legislative assistant during the 63rd session of the legislature, and I'd gotten to know a lot of people in Austin, and I knew the water board. And when they came up to adjudicate the water rights, they were going through the state and trying to find the firm yield of every one of these lakes. The firm yield of Grapevine is about 85,000 acre feet. Here we have 50,000 of the Park Cities, 75,000 for Dallas, 1,500 for Grapevine. They told Grapevine to get their straw out of the lake. They adjudicated our water rights down to 19,000 acre feet. Dallas still has 50,000 acre feet. Dallas had the ability to overdraft, I guess you'd say. They would take the first 50,000 acre feet of their water in January, February, March, April, May, probably. And that caused real concern in the city, because if you get to June and there's not our water left in there, then Dallas is going to have to some way give us extra water that they had in other reservoirs. We had negotiated that. I'm not as familiar with that deal, but the water board basically made a deal with Dallas where they put in a main over on the east side of the university in Highland Park and one on the west side. So if they ever overdraft, we get to call on them for their water for the overdraft. So we're at 19,000 acre feet, never had ever used more than 15,000 acre feet, so they give you a little bonus, and we got the bonus. So we're at 19,000 acre feet. It's the most important thing probably that ever happened to an independent city around Dallas. My dad was a great debater. He was a country boy, and he had grown up and gone to Denton Normal. That's North Texas State. And they drafted him in World War I. Now, this is my dad, not my granddad. And when he saw the troop train there on Congress Avenue and saw that new Capitol up there, he said, I'm going to get back down here. So he ran for the legislature. And if you remember, the legislature always had their seating on the floor of the House of Representatives. They didn't have offices. His desk mate was Sam Johnson, Lyndon Johnson's dad. Now, can you imagine how that meant with my dad? My uncle was my dad's desk page. And anyway, Dad was a great debater. If you go and look at the alcaldes or whatever they call there's pages about the debate team. They went all over the country, much more important than the football team at that time, 1918 to 1924. And anyway, he was a great debater, and he was president of the Dallas Bar. And the mayor of Dallas came to him and said, "Look, we're gonna annex Highland Park University Park." My dad said, "Well, now wait a minute. We're still fighting wars over, over Europe and over in Asia," and said, "Wait until that's over with." No, we want to go right on right now. And so they had a plan, and it's a pretty interesting plan. And they called a vote on April the 3rd, 1945. My dad headed up what you'd call now the committee with a lot of people on both sides. It was very, very, very contested. Most all the people in the block where I lived, their dads were head of banks and insurance companies, and they were all for going into Dallas. The rest of them didn't, and my dad had all kind of support, and they won that election in 1945, April the 3rd, which is the most important date. They voted to stay out of Dallas by 53 to 47%, and the vote was over 4,000. Highland Park voted to stay out, and they also had in that election the annexation of Preston Hollow, and they went in. And so anyway, 3 days later after that, Dallas had been going to Austin to figure out how they're going to annex everything around them, and they did. About 3 days later, and I always say that might have been the second best day, because we developed as an island city. And when you really think about the developments of cities where you got a whole bunch of extra land, like all of them up here, Plano, Richardson, you concentrate on services that are good for the citizens, and that's governmental services: police, fire, sewer, water, and all parks, alleys. That was a big deal with my dad. Anyway, that's the story on the election for annexation, and University Park turned it down. So City Hall was in 1945, let's see, in 1924, when University Park was founded, they had within a year, they had a bond issue that allowed for $150,000. And it tickles me, $75,000 were for roads, $50,000 were for sewer and water, especially water, and $25,000 was for City Hall. And they built a structure where it is now, but it wasn't near what it turned out to be later. They built a kind of a very close, similarly to the I guess it's the maybe the State Hall, or maybe a city in Virginia, and it's that Virginia architecture of that City Hall. Well, University Park has the best hallmarks of any city, anywhere. I don't care where it is. It's got the best police department, fire department, paramedics. My wife, had a stroke, and they were at the front door knocking on it while I was trying to lay her out on the couch, and she got down, and you get that shot. That means a lot to, it basically saved her from really a problem with her stroke. Sewer, water, garbage, then streets, alleys, and parks. So all of that is superior in University Park to anybody else. Now, when I was mayor, Highland Park went to cross-training, police, firemen, paramedics. I went all around the country, and I said, I have you all done this? And I'm talking about, there's very few places like the island city of the park cities. And most of them said, no, if you want a real good first-class fire department, you have firemen. And so anyway, I think we have the best services. Now, let me tell you something that you wouldn't believe. We've been dumping garbage for over 50 years in a garbage dump, so to speak, which was an old sand pit or gravel pit in Garland. It's up in 2028, but that was started about 50 years ago in a trade with Garland. My dad and Ralph Hammond, who was city manager, very progressive. They knew Dallas was going to grow. They bought all kind of land as potential sand or gravel pits that would be garbage dumps. We were dumping all of our garbage over on Lombardi near 35, and that's another thing that happened when I was mayor. We traded that for the Warcola property, which was behind the Dr. Pepper plant, if you remember that. I mean, that was Fred Peak. He really worked that for us. That was a great thing. But think now, Highland Park has waste management picking it all up. No telling what the difference in the cost is. Ours is all going out to Garland. Now, whether Garland's going to allow us to continue, I don't know, but we've got other properties that have that same ability, maybe. Well, my dad's administration is known for three things that nobody else can tell you. Paid off all of its indebtedness. Lowered taxes 3 times. Had a big surplus when he left. He was from 1950 to 1970. 39 commendation awards on, city government. That's unbelievable. Well, that was, I was real young, and in my memory, there's several memories that I have. Dad I remember going to WRR and these big, microphones they had, and I remember him talking there, but I also remember him going, it was either Curtis or, could have been Caruth Park. They had a debate, somebody that was with Dallas and a citizen here and debated my dad. And my dad was a good debater, And anyway, he had a lot of good people behind him. I mean, when you come back to who was behind him, you're talking about Albert Williams, you're talking about, Trevor Reese Jones' dad, you're talking about Marion Solomon, you're talking about J. Cleo Thompson, Bascom Thomas. You can just go on through the names of the people that really wanted to stay out of Dallas, and then they made University Park great. We call it back zoning. But you get these great lawyers like Bascom Thomas, and they take a case to the state, and if you give zoning that had happened before the city was, started, and we had some of that, and they allowed us to back zone places over on High School Boulevard where there was a drugstore and a service department or automobile service department. There were a couple of service stations on where Tolleson building is, if you know where that is, there was, that's the controversy that first started, is people wanting to have commercial zoning. Mm-hmm. And the only fights that I remember, and they, you know, they're still going on somewhat. We had two really firm commercial zoning areas, and that was Miracle Mile, which was Lover's Lane, and Snyder Plaza. Now, they back zoned where they got over on Hillcrest a bunch of properties back to, you know, where they're residential or not commercial. They back zoned across from the YMCA over there, the old Park Cities pharmacy was there. But even Coffee Park was a place that they wanted to have a big commercial development and right at the corner. And basically that came up much later. Dad was not alive at that time, but in the 90s we built that park. And by the way, that's where I learned all this from Diane Galloway. She and I put in, there's a kind of a chronology of the city of University Park up there that we like for school kids to go read. But anyway, it's the fights were always over zoning generally. But you know, they're let me tell you, they're like family fights. There are no Republicans or Democrats ever run that I've ever known that was their reason for running. There wasn't conservatives or liberals. You ran for the city of University Park as either a mayor or a member of the board to do something good for University Park, so it works out, you know. And when I was mayor, they'd get something about parking over here about the Presbyterian Church, and I got to tell this story because it kind of applies to this. They were wanting to pave a whole bunch of, tear off these houses and put big parking places all around the Presbyterian Church. And Joel Williams and Fred Peak were my commissioners. Now those boys were 58 to 60 years old, and I was 38. And boy, there was a big crowd there that wanted all of that. George Underwood, who had lived right there across from the church, right on that corner, a little a little rock house where his dad and mother lived. He was the only one in there against it. And I'll never forget, Joel had a way of calling a little recess, you know, like we're going to the restroom. We went downstairs and he says, "Do you know George Underwood?" And I said, "Not very well." He said, "You don't want to piss him off." So, excuse me. I went back up there and I said, "Mr. Underwood, you get everybody within 200 feet of this church to sign that they don't want all this parking and tearing down all these houses, and we'll have another hearing." And we did. And of course, you know, it worked out. So that's kind of the way things are. You get in there and work things out. I can remember a lot of explosive things about SMU especially. And we'd get up there in a hearing and I'd use the old Winston Churchill deal, you know. Okay, they're always complaining. They're complaining. And then I'd say, "Well, wait a minute. Each one of you had 3 minutes and all you want to do is complain. Do you have a solution?" And they'd say, No. I said, "Listen, that's Churchill's remark. You know, if you complain and don't have a solution, you're just whining." And boy, that'd stop all that, you know. So we have some controversies, but not bad. Well, to me, Now, I've been in everything, banking, railroads, all kind of stuff. Of course, I was a lawyer and oil and gas. There's nothing like an investment in University Park. When I was mayor, the average value of all properties divided by the number of houses we had was $56,000. Now it's $1,000,008. Now come on, that's as good an investment. That place next door here was, probably $20,000 on the rolls, and now they've sold it for whatever, $3.5 million or whatever. Well, that has a lot to do with the high school, and yeah, I mean, I can't imagine any high school having as many great people. I'm not talking about just sports people, but I'm talking about people that went and made really good use of their life, and developed great companies and so on. But all the sports stuff, I can't believe it. It's unbelievable. So I've enjoyed it. And the schools have done great. They do a great job. You see a little creeping in now that they're going to have some real fights in school education. Now, let me tell you what I tell people. I learned. We were under when I was down with Briscoe, we were not under anything like Robin Hood. So we had our own taxing authority. We had basically the appraisal district all over where Armstrong School was. And we had the lowest taxes anywhere. We've spent over $2.2 billion in this community to go to the state for Robin Hood. Now, come on, that's a lot. And when I was down there arguing about it with some of this was 20 years ago, and they say, oh, you gold plate everything up there, and this, that, and the other. And I said, well, in Henderson County, what would $1.8 billion mean, And they say, he thought a minute, he said, that'd be all of it. That's the way these legislators, they think Park City can afford anything. I remember when I was down there, there was a bill to consolidate all the schools in Dallas County. And I had a stack of bills that high, and as you can imagine, I don't know that y'all remember that, but Briscoe was the most conservative guy ever. He wanted to be known only for right on red after full stop, and he always said, man, we have the best deal in the world where the legislature is just in session 140 days every 2 years. That's the best deal you'd make. We wouldn't, never would have a special session. But anyway, I got a call from our superintendent. He said, Roy, there's a bill to consolidate all the schools in Dallas County. And I pulled out that bill. I had all these bills on my desk. And they had determined that I didn't know anything about the legislature when I went down there and said the only thing he has is a pampered son of a small town mayor. That was what they wrote the next day after they interviewed me. Anyway, I got it out. I took it to the governor. He said, we can't have this. And he said, don't worry, I'll veto that. Well, when we got down there with the superintendent and got him with the senator that wrote it, he said, let me tell you something. Highland Park Independent School District is the biggest pain in the butt that we have in Austin, because everybody's trying to do the same thing, and you can't do it. That's just kind of the way the schools have been tremendous, but they are controlled in Austin, and our city is not. Now, they're kind of nipping at it a little bit. The Constitution of the state of Texas is what controls the cities. They've done a few things that they're beginning to encroach a little bit on cities, but that might happen, Preston Road, when we were a nation before we became a state. They had a military highway all the way to Coffee Crossing. Isn't that kind of interesting? It's up on the Red River. It's where the Red River kind of dips down. And a lot of drovers drove cattle up there, but later they put boat arc, basically basing, and then put gravel and or rock, crushed rock, and then gravel. So when that was the main highway through this North Dallas area. They didn't have Central Expressway and the toll road. Mr. Caruth says in his book he could go from his house with his best, I guess, Surrey and rig is all the way to Dallas in 30 minutes by coming over and getting on Preston Road. Now, if you went down the other two, Greenville and Airline, muddy, but that has always been a very famous north-south runway in the state of Texas. I'll tell you another kind of interesting story. My dad's standing there on that lot that he owned, a couple of lots there at Preston Parkway he was about to build. That was 1934. And he's standing out there, and this guy comes up and says, Mr. Coffee, are you Mr. Coffee or something? And he said, yeah. He said, you own these lots? Yeah. You gonna build a house? Sure am. He said, how about building it with steel? My dad said, I can't afford to build this house for steel. He said, I tell you what you do. If you'll just leave the girders and everything uncovered where all the people traveling up down Preston Road can see, when we have a picture, strand steel. That house was built with steel. Now they tore it down, but boy, it took them forever to get it torn down. It was built with steel, 1934, for my dad and for my mother. My dad get up at 5:30. That's when he started his day. And we'd have to be at breakfast at 7. Now, Eugene Locke, who owned this house, was a good friend of Dad's. Gene, Roy, this, that, and the other. So Dad gets a call. He said, Roy, you got to come down here right now. And I was there, and, the city manager basically was calling, not Eugene Locke. The city manager says, Roy, you got to get down to Gene Locke's house. Came down here, standing right there on that deal, there was 4 inches of water, all in this living room. Couldn't believe it. My dad and, Mr. Locke was an ambassador at that time, had another ambassador. They couldn't come in here because it, lowered. My dad, at that point, Turtle Creek has a couple of branches, and it's really one of the problems that we have is runoff water. How you take care of rains when you paved everything and you've got, parking and this, that, and the other. He went up on 2 Lane and put 2 60-inch culverts. I mean, I could ride my bicycle in there. I was only about 13 or 14 when all this happened. All the way up to where the water was coming from Dallas down here. And then now, of course, we, got a septic tank. You probably don't know it up at Caruth Park. There's a big septic tank. That septic tank's where the water that was causing all the problems in the northeast part of the city comes down there, and they catch it there, and then they let it out just periodically. But the main thing is this bridge down here that Trevor built. And when he bought that property there, it didn't have any way to get to a street except a right-of-way that they'd gotten from the Presbyterian Church. I mean, it's a long right-of-way. It might be 100 years for all I knew. But he wanted his own entry, and so he wanted Windsor. And this is way after my day, but they negotiated a deal with Trevor that he would participate in building the most modern dam that you can have. And what it does is that it registers how much pressure is coming off. You know, the lady died right out here, about where that car is, drowned in about 94. And anyway, the long and short of it is, because of that bridge and the changes, this is out of the floodplain. The third bay of the fire station was also partially in a floodplain. So we've always had flooding problems here. Well, Loma Linda was Henry Exall, and what he had was a racetrack kind of to train horses out where Preston Center is now. And then he owned all that land that's over west of Preston Road. And he wanted to do Philadelphia Place, as I remember, they called it Philadelphia Place. And that was where he took the Turtle Creek and dammed it, and it was going to be a development in North Dallas, one of the first. It would be before, you know, probably before the century, before 1900. And then they had some bad times, and he sold property to John Armstrong. And basically, I think that helped him get through. See, I say University Park is a Depression era city because we had WPA build everything over here. Dallas is a roaring 20s city, so they had a bunch of rich people down there that could afford, and they traded land around. You know, Cruz owned most all of it originally, and then Mr. Cole, and then he sold to Mr. Armstrong, and he died. And basically, Ms. Armstrong is the lady that started everything about education and SMU and schools and so on. The Methodist Church was headquartered in Georgetown. And they wanted to build a first-class university up here in North Texas, and they had Dallas and Fort Worth bidding against each other. Now, it's hard for me to get all the information about what happened, but what really happened was Mrs. Armstrong gave the first 100. The McNeely had bought some land from the Daniels, and that's kind of where the Dallas Hall is up there, the north end of it. And then Caruth came in and gave them some land, and they had 165 acres to build this great university. Fort Worth had come up with more money, like $500,000 and some land, not as much land. And they went back to Mr. Caruth, and he gave half interest to SMU with for all that land that's north of, it's be north of Lover's Lane out to Northwest Highway. Well, it's been the biggest problem of every mayor since my dad and Wilson Germany and me and, you know, all of them since then, is the parking. And we're not able to handle that parking, and the parking in the Snyder Plaza that will satisfy a lot of people. That was, let me tell you what the difference is. Lover's Lane is a county road with University Park. So you've got to deal with Dallas County. And when you go to looking at all the things that they've tried to do, they don't alleviate the traffic and they don't alleviate the parking problems. If you could buy that area up there almost where the toll road is and create a parking garage, it might help. That was a suggestion, but we did that in Snyder Plaza, and they got 150 parking places in that building, and nobody uses them. This is the building where the bank is. And when they go to talking to me about that, listen, we spend a lot of money on those parking places. I'm going to say that Lover's Lane has been a problem and has been a major, it was a county road, so it's always it has been there. It's always been there. I mean, since University Park. And it's a real traffic problem, and what are you going to do? It got different owners everywhere. You can't do what they did in Highland Park Village, get one owner. So it's going to be a problem for a good while, and I don't know what the answer is. If I did, I'd have done it when I was mayor. Well, I want to tell you, I've been grading 8th grade essays. I love it. I love it. What's going to happen in the next 100 years in University Park? And you know, in my mind, we got to hold everything together that we can, but it's going to, you know, there's going to be a lot of pressures from lots of different areas to encroach on our city. And to me, it's up to the city. See, this city has 25 to 30% of its property tax exempt. There's not any city anywhere around that has that. You take SMU, you take 8 churches, you take the roads and the alleys, that's about 1/3 of the area. We're at 2350. That's, you know, 3.5 sections. And so we've got, you know, with the tax base, it's going to be expensive to live here. The state's got all that under control, as you know. But anyway, I think in grading these 8th graders, some of them make me cry because they're just so good about, you know, how you live here, how your neighbors, how you have great education, how you get into, you know, you've got great churches and on and on and on, and everything that makes the city great, all the city services. I loved grading those papers, and there was probably, out of the 20, 18 of them, these kids just love where they live, you know, and love their neighbors and love their chances of, you know, and go in, you know, to learn and go forth to serve. They kind of, about half of them use that, you know. That's all over at Highland Park High School. Boy, they're thinking about, you don't want any politics here. See, there's only been 4 city managers in the whole history of University Park. They changed, some of these cities change city managers 4 times in a year. You know, we've had 4 in 100 years.
Yeah, I mean,
That's incredible.